Hi, thanks for watching our post-mortem presentation. My name is Andrea Levato, and I'm here to talk a little bit about our project, Striking Aeternus. We are currently a group of 5 that started as 4 and got as full as 6 before shrinking back to our current size. During these 4 months, as imaginable, a lot went on. To better understand it though, let's take a look at the start. Having the idea of creating a game based in a single main mechanic, we decided for something creative. Most games would go for little gimmicks to allow the player to affect the environment around him. Well, we decided to give the player a command that just completely, absolutely changes everything. It gets to the point that our player is practically navigating multiple environments at the same time. Our mechanic? Time shifting. Our main hero became therefore a time traveler. Someone who could be jumping between different time periods, attempting to fix paradoxes in them. We named him Viator Timatum, the last traveler. Being the last living creature in a dying world, where every single instant of time became corrupt with paradoxes and reality itself is collapsing, the last traveler has literally not a second to lose before everything succumbs to the pure void. It became obvious then that what we were creating was a puzzle game. The inspiration came from different sources. For the game we basically, went back in time, pun intended, to look at the old LucasArts adventures such as Full Throttle, Day of the Tentacle, and Monkey Island. We wanted a puzzle atmosphere of explore and think more than try and error. While motor skills can be obviously important, we were more interested in bringing that smile to our players when they solve the puzzle and think to themselves, yes, it makes sense. UDK and the whole 3D environment allowed us to go a little further, obviously, and push to create puzzles inspired in the ones found in the new action-adventure games, like God of War and Uncharted, of course given the appropriate proportions. The result is Striking Aeternus, a puzzle-oriented action-adventure game. Let's now navigate deeply into this journey to create an unforgettable journey.
Hello everyone, I'm Logan Francis, and I'm going to be talking to you about the mechanics and encounters in our game, Striking Aeternus. The main mechanic in our game is time shifting. You can use your time shifting ability to get past obstacles or solve puzzles throughout the entire game. When we were deciding on making this our main mechanic, we really wanted an effect to go along with the time shifting element to make the player feel like he was doing something important and cool every time that he pressed the button. What we decided upon was a Nightcrawler-esque effect that really came out with this cool black smoke type effect. Time shifting in our game was done in Unreal Script by adding an offset translation to the player pawn and creating 2 levels inside of one UDK map. We are also constantly scanning and using safeguard mechanisms just in case the shift was to ever fail. Non-shift areas in our game are areas where time shifting will not work. Some of these areas were made to create tension or because other objects are blocking the player from shifting in an alternate time period. The temperature gauge in our game is a way to have the player balance between not getting overheated and not freezing your armor, noted by the bar in the left corner. If you overheat, you die. If you freeze, you die. We added heating and cooling areas to add more tension to our game. If you stay in a heating area too long, it accelerates the heat of your armor. If you stay in a freezing area too long, it will cool your armor faster. In most of these areas, they are non-shift zones that add even more tension to the different zones. It is also noted that on the screen when you're in these areas, there is an effect. There is no AI in our game. Due to our story and the way we wanted to create a different type of player experience, we made the conscious decision to not have any AI or enemies but focus on traps and puzzle solving. The traps in our game vary and change throughout the course of development. We wanted to create a player experience where there was many different traps that provided different elements to the different themed levels. In Striking Aeternus, there is many unique encounters from level to level. Throughout the development of this game, we created many different themed levels like a pirate ship and an alien ship So we had to vary the encounters to fit the theme of the level, such as an acid lake on level 6, but also it had to make sense to the game mechanics.
I'm David Rogers, and I will be discussing our gameplay and puzzle designs. From the beginning, we wanted to create Striking Aeternus as a challenging puzzle experience that is inspired by the butterfly effect. To ease the player into these challenges, we aim to create simple level designs for the player to navigate early on in their experience. Our first paradox, A Tale of Two Temples, we introduce the player to their first obstacle. A massive tree blocks the player's path. Having the ability to shift through time allows the player to see that they've traveled in time before the sapling grew into the massive tree that blocks the player's path. Our goal is to make sure that the cause and effect between time periods is obvious to the player. The next puzzle, we went through a few iterations before we created something we felt was more apparent and relative to the player's interactions. In Chapter 2 of A Tale of Two Temples, the player is introduced to a puzzle that requires a bit of thought. The player must turn the gold key into an emerald key in order to progress to the next paradox. One way we made this puzzle a better experience for the player was giving them the ability to create keys instead of destroying the ingredients. This, we felt, was much more obvious to the player. A reoccurring puzzle within Striking Aeternus is the use of containers. These containers are a tool for the player to use to store keys between time periods. Each key is color-coded to a specific colored door. The player must watch out, because containers in one time period may not be in the same place in another time period within the paradox. Also, containers can look very different between each paradox, like this teddy bear, for example, and is clearly marked with an interactive yellow arrow. Another example of the butterfly effect we wanted to showcase in our game is in our third paradox, Water Crushes Rock. Striking Aeternus is about manipulation and how the player can affect their gameplay experience by interacting with specific objects in the environment. The player is swimming throughout most of this paradox because at some point in time the player floods the time paradox to complete it. All throughout Striking Aeternus, we've created obstacles and traps that are like puzzles themselves, whether it's trying to figure out how to avoid a series of lasers and mines, or attempting to figure out how to climb up and grab an artifact or key in hard-to-reach locations. Towards the end of Striking Aeternus, reality is collapsing because of all the time traveling the player is doing. We use this as an excuse to exercise creative freedom to showcase unique gameplay and level designs. Before time collapses, the player races through a pirate ship in one time period and a crashed upside-down alien ship the next time period. All of this is combined to create a unique and challenging experience for the player.
Hello everyone, I'm Tiffany Grant and I'm going to go over the technology used to create Striking Aeternus as well as the development process. We decided early on that we would avoid using Kismet because Unreal Script provided us with the power and control to create the things we wanted to create within the game. Our code, however, is very chaotic and crazy. We have over 64 classes and our pawn class alone has over 2,000 lines, which is a lot, and it was a lot more than we actually bargained for, because we had no idea that the scope would become this large. We did make use of Unreal's Matinee for a couple of our sequences within the game. Our opening cutscene and a few of our puzzles utilize Kismet and Matinee. One of the things that worked very well for us was our main mechanic. It's interesting and it's appealing and it's fun. It allows the player to switch between two different worlds and experience both of these worlds in two different time periods. Another thing that worked very well for us was our prototype. It inspired us to design the rest of the game fairly quickly and easily based off of this prototype that we originally created. Another thing that worked very well for us was communication. We stayed in constant contact with one another through Skype, email, and texting. We made sure that someone was always available to provide feedback or additional help for whatever problem may arise. And that helped us out a lot. And finally, another thing that worked very well for our team was our sound engineers. They made awesome sounds for our games and they based the sounds around our game. They took our ideas that we had and what we were working on and made some amazing sounds, and that worked out very well at the end because we had a lot of amazing sounds going on in our game. One thing that didn't work so well for our team was issues with members not performing and their attitude. Some of these attitude problems and the lack of performance was due to stress and personal issues that they were having at the time. We were eventually able to overcome these problems, but it did affect the team. Tutorials and messages, that was a huge problem within our game. We had to come up with a completely new level in order to provide the player with enough information for them to be able to play the game. And finally, non-shifting areas. That was our most complicated and most frustrating thing throughout development. It wasn't until we created the scanning technique that allowed us to successfully block the player from shifting in certain areas of the world. We were at first a little worried about the performance issues it might have because it's constantly scanning the past and future to ensure that the player can or cannot shift in this area. Even though it provided us with a lot of headaches during the development phase, it worked out pretty well in the end.
Hey everyone, my name is Harley Gomez and I worked on primarily the level design and cinematics of our game. The project has come a long way since pre-production and the final product is way beyond the initial scope we had planned. Early in development, we decided to change our camera to the third-person perspective because it allows players to move the camera around and explore, rather than being in the fixed 2D isometric view that we had previously. This decision is what drove a lot of our additional features due to it changing the way players played our game. We thought it would be interesting to introduce a mechanic where players can deposit an item into an object in one time period and be able to retrieve that item from the same object in the alternate period. This is what we call synchronized containers. Something else we added later on is the ability to swim underwater. This simple mechanic turned into something much greater as our game developed. Since our character can't hold his breath as long as Guybrush Threepwood, we needed to add an air bar for players to keep track of how much breath they had left. This idea of swimming underwater eventually became the focus of an entire level. We also added some cool custom volumes to our game, such as a green gas that slows the player's speed and hinders visibility, and a custom gravity volume that gives the effect of being in outer space. One cool feature we managed to fit in are achievements. Throughout our game, you can unlock achievements by doing interesting things. Some will happen naturally, and some will be quite difficult. One achievement, for example, is called Make a Wish, and is unlocked when the player throws the gold ingot into the lake. We have hidden collectibles that we call artifacts scattered throughout our game. These are optional, but if exploring is your thing, then you'll want to try and find all of these. Upon completing each level, we have a record screen that displays the player's current time and fastest time, as well as current and most artifacts collected. This pretty much wraps up everything about our game. We hope you enjoyed this presentation and thank you for watching. Here is the link to our latest build. You can also find it in the description.